The wine glass trembled slightly in Miranda's hand as she stood and extended the other toward me. I want to be brave tonight. My camera-steadied fingers found hers, warm and certain, despite the tremor I'd noticed. She'd set the terms. Equals, no games, no morning regrets. At 48 to my 29, she commanded boardrooms but stood vulnerable in her suite, choosing connection over caution. Just for tonight? I asked, though we both knew the answer ran deeper. Her laugh was soft, real, maybe longer if we're lucky. The bedroom door waited behind her. The moment stretched between professional and personal, safe and significant. I stood, keeping her hand in mine, but before we begin, let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us. From around the world, I wasn't expecting the call that morning. My coffee had barely cooled enough to drink when the sleek business number lit up my phone screen. I'd been sorting through next month's freelance calendar, trying to make sense of the scattered engagement shoots and real estate documentation gigs that kept my lights on. Mr. Reeves? I'm calling on behalf of Miranda Cheen at Cascade Strategies. The assistant's voice carried that practiced polish that meant serious business. We're interested in discussing our upcoming executive retreat documentation needs. I opened my laptop, fingers moving automatically to search the company while she spoke. Cascade Strategies' website loaded with clean, minimalist design. Exactly. What you'd expect from a high-end consulting firm. But it was the About page that made me pause mid-scroll. Miranda Chen's professional headshot caught my eye, striking bone structure, shoulder-length black hair with natural silver streaks, and dark eyes that seemed to look straight through the screen. The photo was well executed but felt too rigid, missing something essential about its subject. The retreat is scheduled for 3 days at Evergreen Lodge, the assistant continued. We need full coverage of the workshops, team activities, and evening events. Ms. Chun would like to review your portfolio this afternoon if you're available. I glanced at my calendar again. I can make that work. What time? 3 o'clock. Video call. She rattled off the meeting details while I noted them down, trying to sound more composed than I felt. This could be exactly the kind of corporate contract that would let me be more selective about my other jobs. The morning disappeared into careful portfolio curation. I pulled my best architectural work, the series on forgotten Art Deco buildings that had won a local award, candid shots. From corporate events that captured genuine moments of connection between colleagues. Every selection felt weighted with possibility dot at 2:58. I adjusted my desk lamp one final time and checked my video setup. A call connected precisely at 3. And there she was, framed by the warm afternoon light streaming through. What looked like floor-to-ceiling windows in her home office. The screen didn't do justice to her presence, Mr. Reeves. Her voice carried a quiet authority. Thank you for making time today. Shall we begin with your architectural portfolio? I shared my screen and watched her lean forward slightly, studying. Each image with an intensity that made me unnecessarily adjust my own camera twice. Her questions were precise, showing an eye for detail that surprised me. This sequence here, she paused on a series I'd shot of a restored theater. The way you've captured the interplay of light and shadow and the empty spaces, it tells its own story. I believe the moments between are often more revealing than the obvious focal points, I found myself saying, in architecture or portraiture. Something shifted in her expression. Tell me about your approach to event photography. Specifically, how do you handle the unofficial moments between the pose shots? I explained my preference for hanging back, watching for genuine interactions, the small gestures people make when they think no one's looking. Those are often the images clients end up treasuring most, even if they didn't know they wanted them. Because you understand what others miss in light and shadow, there was something in her tone, a layer of meaning that made me pause before responding. Her dark eyes held mine through the screen. Yes, I said simply. That's exactly it. She nodded, more to herself than to me. Well, Mr. Reeves, I don't think we need to prolong this. You're clearly the right choice for the retreat. My assistant will send over the contract and logistics details within the hour. Thank you, Ms. Chen. I look forward to documenting your event. Miranda, please. She smiled then, a genuine expression that transformed her whole face. We'll be working closely together over those 3 days. After the call ended, I sat back in my chair, aware of an unexpected anticipation humming under my skin. 3 days of capturing moments, light and shadow, with her discerning gaze evaluating not just the images, but the way I saw the world. Through my lens, I couldn't help but feel I just stepped into something larger than a simple corporate photography contract. The mountain road curved ahead of me, each bend revealing glimpses of evergreens and distant peaks. I left early, giving myself plenty of time to scout the location before the executives arrived. My equipment cases shifted slightly in the back of my SUV, despite careful securing. 2 camera bodies, various lenses, lights, and backup gear. Better to have options than regrets, especially for a 3-day event. The GPS guided me up the final stretch to Evergreen Lodge, the conference center emerging from the tree line like a modernist's take on a traditional mountain retreat. All clean lines and expansive windows reflecting the morning light. I'd pulled into the curved driveway, already noting potential angles and natural light patterns. That's what I saw through the lobby windows. Miranda Cheen directing a setup crew with the kind of precise gestures that suggested both authority and ease. But this wasn't the polished executive from her corporate headshot, or even the composed figure from our video call. She wore fitted jeans and a soft-looking sweater in deep burgundy, her hair caught by the mountain breeze. The transformation was striking. Before I could gather my first round of equipment, she noticed me through the glass. A warm smile and a wave beckoned me outside. I grabbed my main camera bag and headed toward her, each step bringing more details into focus. The natural silver threads catching sunlight in her dark hair, the confident set of her shoulders, the laugh lines around her eyes that her professional photos had probably smoothed away. Ethan, perfect timing. She turned to include me in the circle of staff members. Everyone, this is Ethan Reeves, our photographer for the weekend. He specializes in capturing the moments we don't even know we want until we see them. The way she referenced our video conversation made it feel like a shared secret. She introduced each staff member by name and role, the kind of leader who made sure everyone was acknowledged. I found myself watching how she moved through the space, already composing frames in my mind, the way she gestured to emphasize a point, her natural inclination to lean in slightly when listening to questions. "Let me show you around," she said, falling into step beside me. "We should go through the schedule so you can plan your setup." The conversation flowed easily as we walked, her presence both professional and unexpectedly warm. The main conference room was a cathedral of natural light, with floor-to-ceiling windows framing mountain views. "The morning sessions will be here," she explained, "but we've got breakout spaces throughout the building." She led me through smaller meeting rooms, each thoughtfully arranged, then out onto a series of connected terraces that wrapped around the building's east side. "These outdoor spaces will be used for informal gatherings, weather permitting," she said, pausing at the railing. The morning sun caught her profile, and I had to resist the urge to reach for my camera. "What are your thoughts on the lighting conditions?" "I've read that mountain light can be particularly challenging with its quick changes." The comment caught me off guard. Not many clients bothered to research photographic techniques. "You've done your homework," I said, studying the way shadows played across the terrace. She smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "I like to understand the crafts of people I work with. It helps me appreciate what they see that I might miss." We discussed technical details, the way the light would shift through the day, which spaces might need supplemental lighting, the best angles for capturing group dynamics without being intrusive. Throughout it all, I found myself drawn to her way of engaging, focused but relaxed, professional but genuine. "I'll let you get set up," she said finally, checking her phone. "The first executives should start arriving in about an hour." She paused at the terrace door. "I'm looking forward to seeing your perspective on all this, on the team, the interactions, the whole weekend." I watched her walk back inside, struck by the subtle emphasis she'd placed on the word perspective. As I began unpacking my gear, I couldn't help but wonder what her perspective might be on me. the photographer she'd hired after one intense video call. Now here in her carefully curated mountain retreat. I started shooting as soon as the executives began arriving, catching their initial greetings and Miranda's warm welcomes. The morning light streamed through those floor-to-ceiling windows, creating perfect conditions for candid captures. I positioned myself at various angles throughout the main conference room, documenting both the formal presentations and the subtle dynamics playing out between. Participants. Miranda commanded the room with a practiced grace, facilitating discussions without overshadowing anyone. I found myself admiring her technique through my viewfinder, the way she'd lean forward slightly when someone was speaking, how she'd use small gestures to direct conversation flow, her talent for drawing out quieter members with well-timed questions. During the first break, she made her way over to where I was reviewing shots on my camera's display. "Mind if I take a look?" she asked, stepping close beside me. Her perfume was subtle, something warm with hints of vanilla and amber, as she leaned in to see the screen. "Of course," I said, adjusting the display angle for better viewing. Her shoulder nearly brushed mine as she began scrolling through the images, and I found myself unusually aware of the small space between us. "There," she said, pointing to a frame showing two executives in animated discussion. "Marcus and David. They're putting on a show of collaboration, but there's tension there. See how David's shoulders are angled slightly away?" She moved to the next image. "Now Sarah here. She's genuinely engaged. Look at how she's leaning forward, taking notes even during the informal moments." I watched her fingers move across the display, struck by how she read these subtle human dynamics the same way I read light and shadow. "You notice everything," I said. She glanced up at me with a slight smile. "Isn't that what we both do? Just through different lenses?" Throughout lunch and the afternoon sessions, I found my camera increasingly drawn to Miranda. It wasn't just her natural presence as the facilitator. It was the small moments between her official roles. The thoughtful tilt of her head while listening to a presentation. The way she'd touch someone's arm lightly to draw them into a conversation. How she'd scan the room between segments to check the energy level. During each break, she'd find her way back to my side for our image reviews. These moments began to feel like private conversations about human nature, told through my photographs and her insights. She'd point out alliances forming between executives, subtle power plays I'd inadvertently captured, moments of genuine breakthrough amid the corporate choreography. "You've got an eye for the real moments," she said during one review, scrolling back to a candid shot of two executives laughing. "Anyone can capture the pose stuff, but you wait for truth." I noticed other executives beginning to exchange glances during our review sessions. Something about our easy rapport must have been visible to them, the way we'd lean in together over the camera. Our quiet exchanges, the shared smiles over particularly revealing shots. "Kevin and Ann keep looking over here," I mentioned during our last review of the day, trying to sound casual. Miranda didn't look up from the display. "They're probably wondering why their usually reserved consultant is so interested in photography," she said, her tone light but carrying something else. Acknowledgement, perhaps, of the energy between us. As the afternoon sessions continued, I found myself increasingly aware of every small interaction with Miranda. The brief eye contact when something amusing happened during presentations. The slight brush of fingers when she pointed out details on my display. The way she turned to catch my reaction to particularly interesting moments. I kept shooting, documenting, everything as required. But I couldn't help feeling like the real story was happening in these small moments between official events. Through my lens, I watched Miranda create space for every voice in the room, guide discussions with invisible skill, and somehow maintain an awareness of where I was at all times. The afternoon light shifted through the windows, creating new patterns. Across the conference room, I adjusted my position accordingly, but my thoughts kept returning to Miranda's earlier words about different lenses. She read people the way I read light, with careful attention to subtle shifts, hidden depths, and moments of unexpected illumination. The The dinner reception wound down around 9 o'clock, executives still lingering over coffee and dessert in small clusters. I'd captured enough networking shots to fill a corporate magazine, so I slipped out to the terrace, seeking quiet and fresh mountain air. The evening had turned cool, stars emerging in the clear sky above the ridgeline. I set my camera bag on a stone table and began checking equipment, more out of habit than necessity. You learn to treasure these quiet moments in my line of work, the in-between spaces, where you can shed the performance of being everyone's documentary shadow. I was scrolling through the day's shots when I heard the terrace door open behind me. Mind some company? Miranda's voice carried softly in the evening air. She'd changed since dinner, trading her blazer for a cream-colored cardigan that softened her silhouette. I needed a break from being on for a bit. Of course, I said, shifting to make room at the table. I was just reviewing today's work. She moved closer, wrapping her arms against the chill. I noticed how you positioned yourself during the breakout sessions, always finding the angles where people forget about the camera. There was one moment where you caught Sarah and Marcus having what they thought was a private disagreement near the coffee station. I looked up, surprised by her attention to detail. You've been watching my process. As closely as you've been watching mine, she smiled, and there was something knowing in her expression. Tell me about that transition from architecture to portraits. That's quite a shift. I set my camera down, considering how to explain. Architecture taught me about patience, waiting for the right light, understanding how structure creates emotion. But buildings, I paused, searching for the words. Buildings don't have fleeting moments of truth. People do. I wanted to capture those instead. Miranda nodded slowly. Speaking of transitions, she said, leaning against the table, I built Cascade after my divorce at 45. Everyone treated it like some kind of ending, but I decided to see it differently. As a beginning, I finished, recognizing the quiet strength in her tone. Exactly. She shifted closer, ostensibly to see my camera settings in the dim light. My ex-husband's infidelity could have been a full stop. Instead, it became the first line of a new chapter. The mountain air had grown cooler, but I felt warmth radiating from where she stood beside me. I lifted my camera, grateful for the familiar weight. Here, I said, let me show you something. I switched lenses and pointed toward the moonlit peaks. See how different lenses can transform the same view. This one compresses distance, makes far things feel intimate. She leaned in to look through the viewfinder, her hair brushing my shoulder. The space between us seemed to vibrate with something unspoken, recognition, possibility, careful restraint. I found myself holding perfectly still, as if any movement might shatter the delicate moment. Miranda? A voice called from inside, her CFO, sounding urgent. We need your input on tomorrow's numbers. She straightened slowly, and we both took measured steps backward, retreating to safer professional distance. The boundary between U.S. remained intact, if slightly tested dot at the terrace door. She paused. We should discuss tomorrow's sunrise shots later, she said, her tone carefully neutral. The light on the mountains at dawn is supposed to be spectacular. I nodded, not trusting myself to read meaning into her words. Was it a simple logistical note or something more? The question followed me as I packed up my equipment, the evening air suddenly feeling colder in her absence. I returned to my room after the terrace encounter, mind humming with unspoken possibilities. Setting up my laptop, I began the familiar ritual of uploading and organizing the day's images. But tonight, each photo of Miranda drew my focus, her gesturing during presentations, laughing with team members, that moment of quiet reflection. By the window during afternoon break, you'd think reviewing hundreds of shots would dull their impact. Instead, each one sparked another echo of our conversation. The way she'd stood close enough that I could detect her perfume, how her voice had softened when speaking about new beginnings. The clock read 10:45 when my phone buzzed. Miranda's name appeared on screen. Weather report shows perfect conditions for sunrise. Want to scout location tonight? Path starts behind conference center. One typed and erased 3 responses before settling on. Good idea, Meet in lobby in 15. Perfect. Bring a flashlight. I changed into hiking boots and layered a thermal shirt under my jacket, wondering if this was strictly professional preparation or something else entirely. When I reached the lobby, Miranda was already there, having traded her cardigan for a fleece pullover and boots that suggested she knew mountain trails well. "I hope I'm not keeping you from sleep," she said, her voice carrying differently in the empty space. I'm usually up late editing anyway. I pulled out my phone's flashlight. "Lead the way." We found the trailhead easily, marked by wooden posts near a stand of pines. The path started gentle, wide enough to walk side by side while our phone lights bobbed ahead. Something about the darkness made it feel like we'd stepped into a private world where normal rules were suspended. "Tell me about your creative process," Miranda said as we climbed. "When you're not shooting corporate events, what drives you to pick up the camera?" Honestly, I ducked under a low branch. I'm drawn to moments people think no one notices. Someone lost in thought at a cafe window. Hands gesturing during an animated conversation, the way morning light changes everything it touches. She hummed thoughtfully. "You're looking for truth in the unguarded moments." "Exactly. What about you? What made you focus on reading group dynamics?" The path grew steeper, loose rocks shifting under our feet. Miranda told me about her daughter Sophia, now studying organizational psychology at Berkeley. She's actually the one who helped me see how my instincts for reading people could become a business model. 24 years old and already teaching. Her mother knew perspectives. When we hit a particularly rough patch, I offered my hand without thinking. She took it, her grip firm as she navigated the uneven ground. Neither of us mentioned how our fingers stayed linked longer than strictly necessary, or how each subsequent tricky spot became an excuse to reconnect. "I started hiking seriously after the divorce," she shared as we picked our way upward. Something about the solitude and the physical challenge helped clear my head. Built a business plan for Cascade on these trails, actually. "Seems like you've built something remarkable," I said, noting how she moved with confident grace even in the dark. "The way your team responds to you, there's real trust there." "That's kind human observation," she smiled, pausing to catch her breath. At a clearing, though this feels very different from my usual executive interactions. "The darkness helps," I agreed softly. "Makes honesty easier somehow." We both let that statement hang in the cool mountain air, neither quite ready to define what truths needed telling. Our phone lights created a small bubble of visibility, beyond which the night pressed close and intimate. I could hear her steady breathing. The subtle shift of rocks under her boots when she moved closer to point out where the sun would rise. "The light will come up just behind that ridge," she said, her voice carrying a warmth that had nothing to do with photography planning. "It should paint everything gold." The clouds parted as we crested the final rise, revealing an overlook that stopped us both in our tracks. Moonlight spilled across the valley below, turning everything silver-edged and dreamlike. A sturdy wooden railing marked the viewpoint's edge, and Miranda walked to it slowly, her figure silhouetted against the vast night sky. I hung back, giving her space while setting down my equipment bag. The moment felt weighted with possibility, like those seconds in the dark room when an image first starts emerging in the developer bath. "Ethan?" Her voice was quiet but clear in the mountain air. She didn't turn around. "I've been wondering something. And maybe it's the altitude or the moonlight making me brave enough to ask. What do you think of me? Not my company, not the retreat planning. Me." The safe answer would have been professional appreciation, maybe a comment about her leadership style. But something about this night, this moment, demanded honesty. I think I started moving to stand a few feet behind her. That I've been pretending to frame shots all day while actually watching how you work. The way you command rooms without raising your voice. How you remember everyone's concerns from previous conversations. The psychological safety you create for your team to take risks. She turned slightly, moonlight catching the planes of her face. I continued, my heart racing, but voice steady. "I noticed your laugh. Genuine, never performative." The focused intensity when you're processing new information. How you treat the catering staff with the same respect as your CFO. You move through the world like someone who's learned what matters and what doesn't. Miranda turned fully now, facing me. The moonlight caught the silver threads in her dark hair, making them shimmer like stars. Her expression held vulnerability I hadn't seen before. You make me feel seen, she said softly. Not as a case study in executive presence or a woman of a certain age, but just seen. In a way that somehow transcends the years between us. I took one step closer, close enough to speak barely above a whisper. You're beautiful because of everything you are, not despite anything. Your age, your experience, your hard-earned wisdom, they're part of what makes you compelling, not something to overlook. Do you understand what we're risking? Her question carried no judgment, just careful consideration. My professional reputation, your potential client relationships in this industry. There would be talk. Yes, I answered simply. I understand. We stood there, suspended in that moment of almost, neither moving to close the final distance between us. The moonlight painted everything in silver and shadow, while below, the valley stretched out like a world holding its breath, every possibility. Hung in the cool mountain air between us, waiting. I could see each detail with a photographer's clarity. The slight tremble in her fingers on the railing. The way her pullover caught the breeze. How her dark eyes searched my face for answers to unspoken questions. For once, I wasn't hiding behind my camera lens, wasn't trying to capture the moment. I was living it, heart pounding. As real and raw as the granite beneath our feet, Miranda was the one who finally broke our suspension, taking a single step forward that changed everything. Her hand reached up, hesitating for just a moment before, touching my cheek. The warmth of her palm against my skin made my breath catch. Is this something you want? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Really want? Instead of answering with words, I leaned down to meet her. Our first kiss was gentle, questioning, both of us testing the reality of this moment we've been orbiting all day. After a few seconds, we pulled back slightly, each searching the other's expression in the moonlight. I haven't done anything like this in years, Miranda whispered, her hand still resting against my face. Her thumb traced a small arc along my cheekbone. I need to know we're on the same page here, Ethan. What page would that be? I asked softly and was rewarded with one of her genuine laughs, though it quickly faded into something more serious. Her expression shifted, becoming more focused. The same look I'd seen her use when establishing important terms with clients, but soft my vulnerability. If we do this, she said carefully, it has to be as equals. No power games, no morning after regrets, no pretending it didn't happen. She took a deep breath. I need to know you see me as Miranda, not as some conquest or story to tell later, not as some midlife crisis cliche. I reached for her hands then, taking them both in mine. They were smaller than I'd imagined, but strong and certain. I agree to your terms, I said, matching her directness, but I have some of my own. I waited until she nodded before continuing. I need to know you see me as more than just a younger man's infatuation, that this connection feels as real to you as it does to me. Her response was to rise up on her toes, pressing her lips to mine again. This kiss was deeper, more certain. Her fingers gripped the front of my jacket, pulling me closer as my arms wrapped around her waist. The mountain air was cool around us, but everywhere we touched felt like warmth blooming got when we finally parted. We were both breathing unsteadily. Miranda's hands smoothed down my jacket where she'd been gripping it. We should head back, she said, though she didn't move away, before we make decisions on a mountaintop that belong somewhere with walls and privacy. I could feel her heart racing where we were still pressed together, matching the quick rhythm of my own. Standing here in the moonlight, holding Miranda. Chan, I realized I'd never felt more present in a moment. Every sense heightened, every detail crystal clear. The subtle scent of her shampoo, the way her sweater felt under my palms, the small catch in her breath when I shifted slightly. You know those moments that feel like they exist outside of normal time? When the world narrows down to just the space you're sharing with another person, That's what it felt like on that overlook, with the valley spread out below us and the stars scattered overhead like scattered diamonds on black velvet. Sometimes I think about that moment. Our first real crossing of the line we'd been dancing around, and I'm struck by how inevitable it felt. Not in a faded way, but in the way that truth feels inevitable once you finally admit it to yourself. Miranda's suggestion about heading back was sensible, practical, exactly what I'd expect from someone who'd built a career on reading situations correctly. But neither of us moved immediately. We stood there for another long moment, her head resting against my chest, my cheek against her hair, both of us understanding that once we started down that mountain path, everything would be different. Finally, she took a small step back, though she kept hold of my hand. The moonlight caught the silver in her hair again, and I had to resist the urge to reach out and touch it. There would be time for that later, I hoped. Time for all the small discoveries that come with really knowing someone. The walk back down. The mountain felt different, charged with something new and delicate. Our hands brushed with intention now, no longer leaving things to accident. The conversation stayed lighter, but each word seemed to carry extra weight, wrapped in the shared knowledge of what had just happened at the overlook dot when we reached the lodge. Miranda turned to me, her cheeks still flushed from the cold air. Would you like to come up for some wine? We should probably talk more before anything else happens. I nodded, following her to the elevator. Her suite was exactly what I would expect it. Elegant, but inviting, with warm lighting and a view of the mountains through floor-to-ceiling windows. She kicked off her hiking boots by the door, gesturing for me to do the same. Make yourself comfortable, she said, moving to the small bar area. She returned with 2 glasses of red wine, settling on the opposite end of the plush couch. I noticed how she tucked one leg under herself, making her seem more vulnerable somehow. There are things you should know, she started, taking a careful sip. My daughter Sophia is 24, not much younger than you. I worry about being seen as, well, you can imagine the assumptions people make. She traced the rim of her glass. And I haven't been with anyone since my divorce 2 years ago. I'm not exactly practiced at this anymore. Her honesty deserved equal vulnerability. I have a pattern, I admitted. I choose unavailable connections, people who are leaving town, ending relationships, just passing through. It's safer than risking something real. I looked down at my wine. I worry that intensity always fades with familiarity. What do you want, Ethan? She asked softly. Really want beyond this weekend? I met her eyes. I want to stop protecting myself from possibilities, to see where something real might lead. Miranda set her glass down and moved closer, until our knees touched. Are you sure about this? About me? When I nodded, she stood and extended her hand to me. Then I want to be brave too, she said. Just for tonight. A small smile played at her lips. Or maybe longer if we're lucky. I took her offered hand, standing to face her in the suite's gentle lamplight. Our fingers intertwined as she led me through the living area, her steps unhurried, but purposeful. At the bedroom doorway, Miranda turned, rising slightly on her toes to kiss me. This kiss felt different from our mountaintop revelation, slower, more certain, carrying the weight of mutual decision rather than discovery. Inside her room, we moved with deliberate care, each gesture a silent question followed by willing answer. Her fingers found my shirt buttons while I traced the elegant curve of her neck, neither of us breaking eye contact. We were both acknowledging what this meant, how it would reshape everything that came after. I haven't felt this alive in years. She whispered between kisses, her voice carrying wonder and something deeper. This present, this real. You make me feel present, I answered honestly, realizing how long I'd been keeping myself at arm's length from genuine connection. Like I'm finally stopping running. We took our time learning each other, the way she sighed when I kissed. Below her ear, how her hand steadied my rushed moments into patience. Our age difference dissolved into rhythm, experience meeting eagerness, caution melting into trust. Every touch carried intention. Every response earned and honest. The night unfolded in whispered agreements and careful exploration. We chose connection over our usual defenses, vulnerability over practiced distance. I memorized the subtle changes in her breathing, the way her fingers tightened on my shoulders, how she said my name like a revelation. Afterward, Miranda traced abstract patterns on my chest, her head resting in the curve of my shoulder. This changes things, she said softly. Not a question, but not quite a declaration either. But it doesn't have to define us. I pulled her closer, breathing in the familiar scent of her perfume now mixed with something more intimate. No, I agreed, understanding what she meant. Morning would bring its own complicated questions. But for now, this moment was enough. This shared warmth, this chosen intimacy, this careful beginning. Early morning light woke me, and for a moment, I oriented myself in the unfamiliar room. Miranda wasn't beside me, but I found her silhouetted against the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching dawn paint the mountains in shades of gold. She'd pulled on my white dress shirt, the hem falling mid-thigh, and held 2 steaming mugs from the Sweets coffee machine. Morning, she said softly, extending one of the mugs as I joined her at the window. The ceramic was warm against my palm, matching the gentle heat of the sunrise spreading across the valley below Dot. We stood in comfortable silence, shoulders touching, watching the light transform the landscape. The final day of the retreat stretched ahead of us, filled with closing sessions and professional obligations that seemed far removed from this quiet moment. I should shower soon, Miranda murmured, though she made no move to step away. The closing presentations start in 2 hours. Instead of responding, I set my mug down and wrapped my arms around her from behind. She leaned back against my chest with a contented sigh, her free hand coming up to rest over mine. No regrets, she said, making it a statement rather than a question, her voice steady and sure. I pressed a kiss to her temple. None. We discussed the day ahead in soft voices, how I'd continue documenting the sessions while she facilitated, maintaining professional distance in front of her team, the reality of our roles settling back around us like comfortable clothes. I want your personal number, she said, turning in my arms. Not just your business card. I'll text you, I promised, then had an impulse. Can I take one photo first? She raised an eyebrow, but her eyes were warm with understanding. Just your hand, I explained, retrieving my camera. Holding the coffee mug with your executive ring catching this light. Miranda nodded, positioning her hand exactly as I envisioned. Through the viewfinder, I captured the moment, morning. Sun glinting off her ring, steam rising from the dark coffee, my shirt cuff falling loose around her wrist. An image that would never appear in the corporate album, but would hold everything about this morning in its frame, through the final day's sessions. I maintained absolute professionalism, focusing my lens on the closing presentations and group discussions. Miranda commanded the room with her usual grace, but now I noticed the subtle ways she held herself, shoulders back, chin lifted, every gesture measured and deliberate. We exchanged glances only in passing, brief moments of recognition wrapped in careful distance. During the morning break, she reviewed my shots with the same analytical eye as before, but stood a calculated foot further away. Her fingers never brushed mine when she pointed out particularly strong compositions. The other executives gathered around, complimenting the documentation. And Miranda's praise was perfectly calibrated, warm but professional, exactly what you'd expect from a satisfied client. Ethan has a remarkable eye for authentic moments, she told her CFO, who nodded in agreement. He's captured exactly the energy we wanted to preserve from this retreat. The farewell lunch brought Miranda's closing address, and I photographed from the back of the room, admiring how completely she inhabited her role. Her words about team vision and future growth rang with genuine inspiration, not a hint that anything existed beyond this professional sphere. I caught myself smiling behind the camera at her masterful compartmental eye on Dot as executives began departing. Wheeling suitcases and exchanging business cards, Miranda approached for our final official interaction. Her handshake was firm, professional, exactly 3 seconds long. Thank you for your excellent work this weekend, she said, her voice carrying just far enough for nearby ears. But as our hands clasped, I felt her slip something into my palm, a folded piece of paper. The movement so subtle I almost missed it. Back in my room, surrounded by half-packed camera cases, I opened the note. Her personal phone number was written in precise strokes, followed by two simple words for possibilities. I texted her immediately. We'll send the edited portfolio through official channels, but I'd like to see you again. Her response appeared within minutes, staying an extra night to decompress. Ew, the restaurant felt different without 60. Executives filling it with shop talk and PowerPoint terminology. Miranda sat across from me at a corner table, the mountain sunset painting her profile in warm gold through the floor-to-ceiling windows. She changed into a soft cream sweater, her professional armor set aside. I have to admit, she said, swirling her wine glass with a small smile, I've never had a conference photographer turn into a dinner date before. And I've never had a client slip me her phone number, I replied, making her laugh. Though technically, the contract's complete, so you're not my client anymore. We traded observations from the weekend, which executives were secretly allies. Who was positioning for promotion, little details only she and I had noticed. Her insights made my photographs richer, adding layers of context I'd missed even, while capturing the moments. You know this won't be simple, she said after our entrees arrived, her tone gentle but direct. There are 19 years between us. My daughter's 24. People will have opinions. I know. I set down my fork, meeting her eyes. But you know what makes the best photographs? Difficult lighting conditions. The challenges force you to be more creative, more intentional. Her expression softened. I built my entire company on navigating complex dynamics. It would be hypocritical to shy away from this one. We began mapping out real plans, grounding our connection in practical steps. I'd drive back to the city tomorrow, but return next weekend. She mentioned a 3-day conference near my neighborhood next month. We'll take it slow, she said. Let this develop naturally. After dinner, we walked the mountain path one last time, our hands linked openly in the growing dark. At the overlook where everything had shifted the night before, Miranda turned to face me. Thank you, she said softly, for being brave enough to be honest up here. I squeezed her hand. You taught me something about bravery, too. We stood together, watching stars pierce through the purple dusk, the valley spreading out below us. The path ahead would be complicated, but standing there, I felt ready to walk it with her, one careful step at a time. That if this story sat with you well, subscribe, and share the line that lingered longest. I read every one, and they guide the next tale I tell.